What's going on, everyone? How are you guys doing today? Trying to get this tripod a bit sorted here, and we'll be good to go. Here we are. Where are we at? Boom. How is everybody? Hope you guys are doing well, and if you can see this thing all right, let me know. We'll let Facebook do its thing and get everything up and running. All right, we got some people tuning in here, and I'm gonna put my headphones on, and we're gonna make this all happen. So, perfect. Thanks, Tim. Hey, Tim from Chicago. Appreciate you tuning in. Yeah. Hey, if everybody, what's up, June? Hey, I'm guessing I know who that is from NC. Hope you guys are doing well, and glad it works. I'm going to throw this on my headset. If it sounds worse, we'll take it off. All right. Hey, Mark. Good to have you. How's this? Does this sound okay as well? All right. I'm going to get this thing kicked off. Get it going. All right. For those of you that have done this lovely Facebook Live things, it takes a little minute to populate, so I'm going to let it get itself sorted here, and I'm going to jump right in. So first of all, thank you guys. All right, great, June. Thanks. I'm glad. That's what I was looking for. Wanted it to be a little bit quieter. Thanks for tuning in, John. Looks like we've got a bunch of people, so I'm going to jump right into it and start talking about the mental aspect of paddling, but also beyond that, how we can apply it to our world of life. So thank you guys for tuning in. My name is Jeramie Vaine. Obviously, I am on the Paddle Monster page right now, so grateful for John Bosane to extend the invite to let me jump on this with you guys and chat about things that are super helpful to me, not only for racing, but as I mentioned earlier, life. So basically where I started to dive into this from is I didn't know what I was doing with it a long time ago. And, you know, as myself, I've been dabbling in athletics for a long time and got into racing about 9 years ago. It's as I got into stand-up paddleboarding and then stand-up paddleboard racing, I got into yoga, and the yoga aspect of it was a piece that started to expose the power of the mindfulness. And when we say mindfulness, it has a multitude of meanings, and sometimes it gets kind of lost as athletes on what that actually means. And as I started to develop into a coach in paddling and then also in the yoga practice, I started to understand it in a bigger perspective and seeing where it could be super beneficial to all athletes. And one of the things, and I always use this when I talk about it in coaching and in any aspect, and even when I talk to myself, is, and it was a tagline that I used, is do not lose to the person on your own board. And so what does that truly mean? Ultimately, it's do not psych yourself out, right? And how often do we forget to that? And I know a lot of you, and I've seen it, and I'm going to use Chattajack as a great example. I'm going to do a little story about it. And basically, when we set out to these events, so Chattajack's a great example because we are forced to register early. It's not like some of the local races where we can, you know, on a Thursday afternoon be like, shoots, I'm doing nothing this weekend, let me register. So Chattajack, we have time, right? We register in May, and then we build our training program, you know, and the guys at Paddle Monster do a great job, and the gals at Paddle Monster do a great job at putting together some great programs with nutrition and with strength training, with how to be successful, right? So we do all this work. We're super diligent. We do the physical aspect. We go out there and we put the hours on the water. We get used to our equipment. We paddle with people. We get experience. As it starts to develop and blossom, we get closer to the go time, and all of a sudden we start adding one variable to the whole thing that starts to play with our psyche. And that one variable that we start to add is we start checking the conditions, we start checking the flow, and we start adding these little components. And the more we start to engage in that, the less we remind ourselves about all the hard work. I know it's going to be a tough one, Larry. And so all this hard work we put in the months leading up to the race, we start to take away by focusing on the little things such as the conditions. Now, what does that mean and how does that happen? So I have some good friends and myself. I've done this a million times over. And the reason why I use Chattajack is because I know we talk about the flow rate, right? So we know that's a 32-mile paddle, plus or minus, and we know that it's a significant amount of time, but the amount of work that we all put in to get there, we're in the shape no matter the conditions. Last year was my first year, so I got to experience it, and it was so inspirational seeing people just go out there and shrugging along and doing it. But I also saw some people start to psych themselves out. And so this is what kind of incited me to this whole thing of how to talk about it. So I used an example a few weeks back in a blog I wrote about when we show up to the race. So it's the week before the race or 2 weeks before, basically when we start the taper aspect, right? The moment we start tapering, that's when the mind starts to play in. And I'm sure Coach Larry and Coach Seychelles and Travis have provided some information on this. On tapering is one thing, but keep your mind busy so it doesn't grab onto these things. So the first thing we'll start doing is checking the weather. And so we start checking the weather and seeing if it's going to be windy, if it's going to be sunny, if it's going to be hot, if it's going to be cold, if there's going to be waves, if it's going to be anything different. The ironic part is the last 60 days, 90 days, 180 days, whatever the time frame is, we paddled in all those conditions. But now we started to, oh my God, it's going to be windy. It's going to be out of the northwest. Well, that's going to change this game. So we start focusing on this little nuance. So now as the week goes by and we start to get into that, we start to look at our equipment. Well, I have a flat water board. Well, I have a rough water board. I have an all water board. I have a dugout. I have, a non-recessed deck board. And we start saying, well, which one should I bring? Okay, I should bring this one. We disregard the fact that we've been on X board for the last X amount of weeks. And so now all of a sudden we add a variable. The variable is, do I have the right board? And then we look at our fin. Do I have the right fin? Well, fin is great for surf. This fin is great for downwinding. This fin adds more stability. Next thing you know, we have another variable. So right now we're looking at the weather. We're looking at the board. We're looking at our fin. Now as we start to get closer to the time, and then sometimes we actually look at the size of our paddle blade. So we can throw all kinds of variables, and depending on who we are and what we're doing, that may change. It might not be a fin, it might not be a paddle. So we're adding all these possibilities that could go wrong. Now as it's the day before the race, we're going to sit down and have our meal. We start to think about what to eat. Well, I should really eat this. I should eat that. I shouldn't eat this. I shouldn't eat that. I shouldn't have a beer. I should have a beer. And we disregard how we handled our bodies the last, I'll use 60 days, for example. A lot of us train a lot longer than that, but we'll say 60 days. So the 60 days leading up to the event, we have tested eating this way. We've tested, maybe having a beer. Some people swear by having a beer before the race. Some people don't. It's all on your own. But all of a sudden, we start adding this new piece to our psyche, and we change everything. And now it's the night before the race. Okay, time to go to bed. So we ate spaghetti and meatballs, and we had a Heineken. Okay, great. We didn't have spaghetti and meatballs or a Heineken the last 60 days. So why did we just add it to our whole new regimen? So now you go to bed. My stomach's feeling a little funky. I don't know. And we toss and turn all night. Let me check the weather in time. Grab our phone, check the weather. So we start looking into all these new avenues, and then we don't get any sleep because we're tossing and turning. And while this is all happening, the sleep part is on the night before a race. Yes, it's great to get a good night's sleep, but the reality is there's so much going on. A lot of times we don't. The adrenaline's pumping. So that piece is always a tough one. But so far we've kind of put ourselves in this tough place to help with getting a great night's sleep by adding all of these worries, right? So now the alarm goes off. It's race day. Either we're at the site or we drive a bit. So we get in the car, all of a sudden, well, should I have a coffee? Should I have 2 cups of coffee? Should I eat potatoes? Should I eat eggs? Should I have granola? Again, we start going through these whole aspects of beating ourselves up instead of utilizing, hey, every morning when I went out and trained, I made a smoothie with kale and peanut butter and almond milk. And then I went out and paddled and I had a great workout and then I had my recovery. All of a sudden we change it because it's a day of said race. And again, we're allowing our mind to do that. Again, we go through our mental capacity. Should I bring hydration pack today? Well, what hydration pack should I have? Should I put electrolytes in it? Instead of having all these things set up the exact same way as of the Chatterjack paddle we did 30 days earlier, now all of a sudden we're adding variables and making it so tough to mentally be dialed, when the reality is it doesn't matter what you do. You're trained, you're ready, it's all there in our hands. We just got to go out and do it. And we can. So this is all going on in our brain. Now it's my favorite, right? We walk into the race. We talk to somebody, and then they say, did you check the weather? And as soon as someone goes, did you see the weather? You're like, no. You're like, oh, well, did you see the buoy? They added a left-hand buoy turn. And you're like, well, I hate left-hand buoy turns. And so all of a sudden now here we're focused on a left-hand buoy turn. Well, we've done 5,000 left-hand buoy turns in the last 60 days, but today all of a sudden this left-hand buoy turn is going to be the demise of our race, even though it's a 32-mile race, but there's a left-hand buoy turn here. Well, okay, so is that left-hand buoy turn going to ruin the race, or is it going to just be a part of the race? Well, it's just a part of the race, but we give the mind something to grab onto. So where does this all mean and where does this all go? Basically what happens is this mental game that we're getting ourselves into is just chipping away at our confidence, step by step by step. Physically, we were in the best shape. Diet-wise, we've been spot on with our nutrition. We've fasted or we've not, however our nutrition has worked for our body. We've talked to the nutrition coaches. Everything has been perfect. Now all of a sudden, we've come to the race and we've changed it all. We've looked at the weather conditions. There's a little texture out there. We've checked it on our phone 4,000 times. It's not going to change. It is what it is. So what do we do to change this? How do we create mental strength and how do we get to the next place? For me, it just starts with the basics and we go back to these 60 days. Every training, and I know Coach Larry talks about this all the time, is if you train like you're going to race, then a race is just another training day. So when you show up, and you already know, hey man, I eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches before I paddle every day, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. I use the downwind fin every time I paddle. That's what I'm going to use. I use an 82 square inch paddle blade. That's what I'm going to use. I use my dugout, all water board. Boom, done. So all these variables are already gone. To me, the weather aspect, yes, it's good to know what the weather is, but stop checking it. It is what it is. Know your limits. Okay, if it's blowing more than 25 miles an hour, and it's more than 2 feet, it's too much for my conditions, then I won't go out. Now, as that sounds simple, the piece that I start to add into it is we are in this whole new development of the mind. How do we make the mind stronger? So we're using these pieces in our training. So we add one piece. What's going to happen when we're out on the race day that we may not have prepared for? Well, a boat might come by and throw a 6-foot roller that we weren't expecting. I know we've encountered that numerous times in Carolina Cup. All of a sudden, this massive roller goes by, and no one expects that to come out. But you've paddled in conditions similar. The piece that I like to really focus on, and I know Coach Travis talks about this a lot too, is breathing. So the breath is the controller of our mental game. And so as we're going through all this stuff, what we need to do is check in with our breath. The moment the breath becomes short and erratic, it actually triggers off the subconscious fight or flight mode. And that fight or flight mechanism basically puts us into an ultimate panic. And so as our breath is short and erratic, we start acting short and erratic and not in control of everything that we need to be in control. So our stroke rate may change. All these things may just go out. And ultimately, we're probably going to spike our heart rate and do some other things that are going to affect our racing. So what we do, we feel ourselves getting in there, slow down, and start to breathe. The first thing I tell everybody to do is exhale. If you can exhale nice and long, and if you start with the mouth, that's great. The nose is always the best, but if you can exhale the breath nice and long, The air will come back in through the nose. I promise. You'll definitely breathe in. So try to bring the air back in through the nose. We'll pause. And then you exhale back out nice and long. Always trying to keep the exhale longer than the inhale. So no matter where you are, start line, on the race course, on the drive over, laying in bed at night, that breath work right there, longer exhale than the inhale. Start with a 4-second count, and that right there will start to lower the heart rate. It'll start to make everything come together, and the anxiety will start to just dissipate. The next piece I always talk to myself is start to laugh. Realize, what story are you telling yourself? Are you really concerned about your fin after training 60 days? And if you're that concerned, then obviously you probably should have looked at the fin 60 days ago. So today is not the day to look at the fin. 60 days ago we should have looked at it. But as you start to laugh and chuckle and realize it's not the fin, I'm good, I got this, one step closer to that mental strength. So to me, what I start to do is I look at this whole mind aspect. And the whole mind aspect is we have to separate from it. And so what I mean by that is, if you ever, I use this analogy all the time, if you ever go into a restaurant and you take that voice, the race day voice, and you were to put it at race day lunch next to you in a chair, and you were sitting next to Coach Larry and John Batson and, a handful of other people, Seychelles was there, and that voice was talking like it talks to you, most people, including yourself, would be like, hey, can you calm that voice down for us? It's getting a little bit aggressive. So that voice just has to talk. And what it is it's nervousness, and that's a beautiful thing. Nerves are a great thing. So as it's talking and saying these things, check the weather, check the fin, check the paddle, check the board. Did you do this? Did you do that? Oh my God, is that who this person is? Start to tap into that breath work, slow everything down, and notice what happens. And even if you're in the middle of breakfast, you can just take a moment and start to breathe. No one's going to notice. 4 seconds isn't a long time. You do a couple of rounds of that, all of a sudden that mind, that voice starts to dissipate and slow down. And all of a sudden you come back into the self. Hey, Jimmy. And you notice that it literally is just banter coming in and out, in and out. So that piece is a really beautiful thing. And it doesn't just stop on the race day at the breakfast or the drive over. And I've noticed this a bunch of times personally, and as Larry talked about the draft train earlier, that's a prime example. When I've been in the draft train with Larry and trying to hang on to his wash for dear life, my mind's like, you can't keep up. There's no way. What are you doing? Yada, yada, yada. So it's just going. So I just tap into that breath work, smile and laugh and realize that, hey, listen, I physically am going to do my best to keep up there. I'm going to use my skills to wash ride, and I'm going to go there. But the moment that I start listening to that voice and be like, oh, you're right. Yeah, I'm tired. I'm feeling my back, my hips. Yeah. Next thing you know, Larry gets a board length away. And then it's 2 board lengths away. And then all of a sudden, the confidence is gone. And now, there goes John Batson. There goes the next person. And you just keep falling back because all of a sudden you lost your confidence. Then you reconnect with your breath and you feel like $1,000,000. And that's happened to a lot of us. And ultimately, that is what it is. It's allowing the mind game, the mind, to just break apart. And then that, it's not, you are not falling apart from your training standpoint. You are ultimately letting the mind win. So how do we work on this besides the breath aspect? So a lot of the pieces to look at is, like I said, I talk a lot about the yoga aspect and sitting in stillness. So what I say to a lot of people is, on your drive to a race or a training, shut everything off in the car, listen to silence. No podcasts, no music. Just, can you sit with yourself? And the reality is we do that when we paddle, right? I've been a stickler. I don't think I've ever paddled with music ever. And the reason why I always want to know what's going on in my surrounding. But the other thing is that when you don't have music in your ears, you actually get to listen to yourself. And so that's where you start to hear this banter. And you can turn it in from being the biggest critic, because if you think about it, our biggest critic is ourselves, and that's that inner voice. So you turn that critic to being a cheerleader, and they're like, you can go ahead and you can chase down Larry. You got him. You go ahead. And all of a sudden, you're like, yeah, I can. I got this. I got the energy in me. Boom, I'm going. And next thing you know, you stay on that wash, and you do whatever it takes to get there. And your heart rate may go up and down, but all of a sudden, you're confident because you're supporting yourself instead of beating yourself. So sit with that voice on the drive over to the boat ramp, to the launch, and see what happens. On race day, sometimes I go there, and as the banter starts to get crazy, I just start laughing. I'd be like, really? Are you going to listen to that? And if someone's with you, they're going to be like, are you okay? Is everything all right? But the reality is we all have a voice that talks to us quite a bit. So that's one of the ideas that I talk a lot about. In this breathing exercise, the more that we get into the breath work, the more we start to be able to control this aspect, because it all is about breathing. So there's a few different exercises we can do. One of my favorites is we inhale for 4, pause for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. And you do that 5 to 6 rounds, and notice how calm you become. So I will do this all the time. I'll do this on the ride to the boat ramp, to the launch. I'll do it as I get into the, let's say I go through one whole round of intervals, and all of a sudden I'm like, my body's killing me. I'll go back into the breath work aspect. And I might not be able to do it through my nose, but, I know Coach Larry gives us a lot of rest and in between the intervals, so you can do this. It's legitimately, if you think about it, it's 16 seconds, right? So just take your time and go ahead and get yourself. Now you're lowering your heart rate, but you're also getting rid of that mind. So that breath work is really beneficial. One of the things I've done a lot with is the power of cold water. And I've never trained with Wim Hof, but I stumbled upon him. I did a lot of his readings, and what resonated with me the most was his statement about a cold shower, and it was pretty much spot on. And it's very similar to training, right? So cold water sucks. Like jumping in a cold ocean, cold lake, cold shower is legitimately miserable. So if you can suffer through that for 10 seconds, you ultimately teach yourself that you can suffer through anything. So you can build upon those times. So for me, what I've started to do is I use my cold lake here, and with really long breath work. So never holding my breath, but always in that same, long duration, long exhale, long inhale, because it builds heat. But I stay in the water for basically up to 3 minutes, and the water's in the mid-30 range. And the same thing with walking over the snow. It's all about the breath, but breaking the mind. The mind's going to just be like, oh my God, you're going to get hypothermic. You're going to have this issue. You're going to get that, and you start to break through that. So I've used cold water for that aspect, and it's been super helpful. And I know Coach Larry and Coach Trav have definitely done this, and I'm sure the other coaches as well, but train harder than you're going to race. Sounds silly, right? But the reality is are you most likely going to hold zone 5 for 30 to 45 seconds in the middle of the race? Well, most likely not. Are you going to hold zone 4 for 3 minutes? Probably not. But if you do it in training day, guess what happens on race day? You can. And that is ultimately, and I know Larry has talked about this a lot, is when you teach yourself that your training is the race, that you can go zone 3 for 6 minutes all day long, or Chattajack style, you can go zone 2.5, zone 3 for 8 hours. So that is what training is. So the harder you can push yourself during your training, the more you start to break through that mind. So when you show up on race day and, you see Coach Larry there, you're like, you know what, I'm going to go my best to stay on that wash, or, hey, Doug's in town. I love racing with Doug, and I'm going to paddle really hard and stay on his side wash, and we're going to push harder today. So you're building yourself up. So push yourself as hard as you can during the trainings and find that breaking point. Obviously, if the intervals are zone 3 and zone 4, don't be at zone 5 to try to break yourself. Stay within the zones, but just learn how that training is working for you. So that's one of my favorite things. And then the other piece is, and this is the love of the conditions, which I truly believe in, and I think it's a beautiful thing. Most of us will come to a race, especially I'll use Carolina Cup, for example, and even Chattajack, and you guys have been through so many gnarly races at Chattajack, but Carolina Cup, we've seen it all, headwinds, massive surf, horrible currents, right? And so if you show up from paddling on, a controlled, let's say a lake right here where I grew up in New England, on a flat lake with no current and no waves, and you only paddle when it's glassy flat, well, of course Carolina Cup is going to be intimidated. Like, it's a totally different animal. It's rougher. So what you have to do is start to look at what the conditions you're going to be on. And sometimes it may not be feasible for you to be able to get out there. But so what I've done is, looking at my situation here, is I know on the weekends the lake's super busy. So I'll go out there and paddle around, and I'm not going to train per se, but I'm going to paddle during the nastiest waterways. So there's boat waves coming from every direction. There might be a headwind, might be a side wind, and I'm just going to get comfortable on my board. I'm going to play on it. So that Sunday or Saturday paddle becomes a training paddle. I hold zone 2.5, that comfortable zone 3 rate, but I'm putting myself in these conditions. And now as the weeks go by, well, then next Saturday, I'm going to maybe put a training interval workout in there, and I'm going to go out and see, man, can I push through these things? And one of the things you'll notice from the top paddlers in the world is where they excel is when the conditions get the gnarliest. And that's because of having the ability to push through and just to mentally just say, this is nothing. I know what it is. I can see the bumps. I can feel the current, and that's how you start to drive through. So put yourself in these conditions. If it's raining out one day and you have the right equipment, go ahead and get out there and paddle in it and be like, man, this is the nastiest thing ever. Well, then when you show up at race day and it's 75 degrees and no wind and sunny out, you're like, this is beautiful. Or if it happens to be a northwest wind and it's 55 and raining, you're like, well, I trained last week and it was 45 with the same wind, but it was just faster. Now you're in a good situation. So that's another thing that I really like to focus on. And along those same lines, we all have limits, right? So don't think that, I can push the mind, I can break it. And, don't be dangerous with it. Like, know your limits. So if you say, hey, man, I don't like to go in anything over shin high, and because I fall all the time, and, I don't want to fall in out of my boards. So then that's your limit. And build upon it. Maybe every time it's below shin high, you go out there and it gets better. And then next time, all of a sudden, it's knee high. But so on race day, if it's thigh high, be like, you know what, I just don't feel comfortable. And no one's going to ever fault you for that, for knowing your limit. So don't go ahead and try and get yourself in a bad spot. Then you're ultimately empowering in that fear because it's well-deserved. You honestly put yourself in a place where you're scared out of your mind. So that's one of the pieces that I looked at. And another thing, and I know the coaches always harp on this too, and it's something that I've learned to do and from my other disciplines of sports is skills. And I use the buoy term analogy because I've heard it so many times. Like, we show up at a race and we're like, I don't want to go and do 50 buoy turns. And to me, in a sport, that'd be like showing up at a basketball rink and being like, I don't want to take free throws, or going on. To me, it's part of the game. If there's buoy turns, if there's not a buoy turn, hey, so be it. But most likely there's going to be a turn in a stand-up paddleboard race. That's just part of life. So practice. Go out there, and if you're afraid of falling in, maybe you put your wetsuit on or your dry suit and your life jacket and your leash and all the tools, and go and just spend a day doing buoy turns. Left side, right side, every stance possible. Fall in 100 times. Learn to fall. Learn how to get back on. Learn how to fall, get back on, and take off. Put yourself in these scenarios where you all of a sudden, no matter what happens, what scenario presents itself, if you come unglued, you know that you can come back together. Because a lot of times what happens is when we come unglued, that's when the mind just takes over. And I'm sure we've all been there before. I've found myself in that situation where I'm sitting on my board being like, what the heck am I doing? How did I get myself into it? I'm never doing this race again. A few deep breaths, stand back up, get paddle stroke going, all of a sudden I'm gone, right? That's the thing. Thanks, Christy. And so those are the things, start to set ourselves up for success. And granted, we can't do everything. Like if you live, again, I'll use my example. I live here in a flat lake in Massachusetts. I can't go out and learn how to surf. So put yourself in that perspective. Now maybe the beauty is the Paddle Monster camps are always going to the coast, and I know they're teaching a lot of surfing. So, maybe you put that in your bucket list. Like 2021, I'm going to sign up for a camp and learn how to surf my race board. And so have goals, and it's okay. It doesn't ever, the beauty of our sport, and I think this is the part that I love the most about is, whether you're 31 or whether you're 51, we all can continue to learn. And there's so many people in this sport that can show us that, And thanks, Charlie. So that skill set is something I learned that we really want to kind of look at of like, how can we continue to develop? Because it's what it is giving us confidence. So the more confidence we can give ourselves, the less we empower the mind. So again, I want to just reiterate a couple things as we go through, and then I want to open up some questions. As we get to, and I'm going to use the analogy again, this is my favorite because we do psych ourselves out. We show up at race day, we're ready, we're registered, we got our board, we walk down to the line. And we're typically, this always happens, but we lined up on the start line. Carolina, a couple of user examples, or even Chattajack, we're lining up, we're waiting for the announcer to say, hey, you guys ready? Mark. And all of a sudden, we're not sure what's going on. We're looking left, we're looking right, we're chatting with somebody, we're still talking about the flow and the weather and the wind, and did I wear the right booties, and do I have the right fin? And thanks, Luciano. And so when you're starting in your head, right, all of a sudden you forgot about the most important part, which is the start of the race. And I've talked to so many people that have missed the start, and I'm like, well, what were you doing? Oh, I was talking with Bob, and Susie and I. Well, okay, great. Like, obviously our sport is super social, but what the heck were you talking about? Like, they gave you the 1 minute count. Get yourself to the line. So set ourselves up for success. I always tell everybody, get around the people that you want to be with throughout the race, and that's going to be your gateway. And when everybody goes, we go. And I know it always is so varied, but like, that's the whole piece, right? The next piece is when that voice starts chatting it up, ask what it's saying. Is it even valued? Are you on the start line right now, worried about your fin going to change the race? Worrying about, did you put enough electrolytes in your water for a 60-minute race? Is that even valid? So start to really just look at what the message is being sent to you. And if it's comical, which I guarantee you 99.9% of the time, it will be absolutely comical, laugh. Be like, oh my God, you're really going to talk about, okay, I had a sausage patty for breakfast. You're really going to bring that up right now? No, we're going to paddle. We're going to do this. Laugh, breathe, get back into the game. If we make it playful and fun, then the mind doesn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden you get into your game, right? So those are some of the pieces that I've seen. Thank you, Jonathan, for tuning in. So I want to turn this over to you guys. I'm going to leave you guys with one more quote before I say that. But and I'm sure Coach Larry will say that. The amount of work you all put in is beautiful, and I love seeing it. And an honor to be here today to talk with you all. But keep in mind that racing is probably 99% mental. So all the work you guys need to do, remember, you put in the work and the time. When you show up on race day, the only thing left is mental. So own the mental game, and you will smash your personal best. I promise you. Yeah, John, always good to hear from you too, buddy. All right, guys, if anybody has any questions, I know I talk fairly quickly, but I want to turn it over to you guys. Any questions on mindfulness and mindfulness training and how to be mentally strong, or if I missed something or if something was confusing, feel free to chime in. But I thank you guys all for being here, and thanks, June. So one of the things is, yeah, Tim, thank you so much. One of the things, and I'll leave some stuff for you guys, is your next training session. Yeah, thank you, Paddle Monster. Wouldn't be here without you guys. Next training session, maybe add some breath work. And even if it's the drive to the boat ramp or even the walk down to the water, just really, thanks, Derek, focus on the breath work, and again, always goal through the nose, but if you got to go through the mouth, some people can't breathe as well through the nose, so go ahead and do it. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Steve. But think about that. So I'll leave you guys with that, and feel free to shoot me a message on social media. Always here to help, and I'm sure we'll have some more stuff. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and Everybody be safe. Talk to you guys soon. Choo.